game theory videos, and me and Matt have sometimes had an antagonistic relationship back and forth. I inconvenience him with my games, and sometimes he inconveniences me with his theories. But it's all in good fun. But I'll tell you, he did a video on that box, and he kind of said that he thinks the contents of the box changed over the years. And I bet nobody gave that a whole lot of thought, but I saw that and I was like, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. The contents of that box have changed over the years because, for that very reason, it's because, of what I was intending the game to be when it happened, and then after the reaction of it, I was like, I need to craft this into something better for the people who see this as important, and that kind of indirectly does change the contents of the box, because it changes the contents of everything that came before. So I thought that was an interesting observation on his part.
There is a common belief within the Five Nights at Freddy's community that as of the second FNAF interview, the contents of the box no longer have any value, and left a lot of theorists to try and move on from the contents. If you came here to hear the same regurgitated information from everyone on the topic, you came to the wrong place. But if you came here looking for answers, real answers, to the Five Nights at Freddy's series, you're right where you need to be. Grab a snack, sit down, and let me tell you just how simple the Five Nights at Freddy's lore actually is, and how everyone else complicates it. Firstly, what's inside the box? Is it nothing? Is it some lost path Scott decided not to take? Short answer, no. Long answer, it was. As I showed in the beginning of the video, during the original Scott interview, Scott would compliment game theory for realizing the contents of the box had changed over the years, something no one else had mentioned, and that the original contents of the box were never discovered when Five Nights at Freddy's 4 came out, and so he ditched that timeline to ground out a new story for FNAF 4. Sound familiar? That's what Scott was referring to in the interview, which of course, if he changed his mind years ago on what's inside, he wouldn't remember the original contents of the box. What's my point? Well, as I mentioned in my first video of my little I Solved FNAF run, I mentioned how I know what's inside the box now, and how it was told to you throughout the FNAF 4 story. Playing throughout the FNAF 4 minigames, we're told that the plushies in Dave's room are his friends, and how one, who we'll call the Yellow Eyes, is able to talk to him even when the plushie is nowhere to be seen, and can seemingly teleport. This is because the plushie in FNAF 4 is the imaginary friend of Dave's. On night 6, after the bite, we see Dave still alive, seemingly in a coma, where he's surrounded by his 5 stuffed animals, and Michael says he's sorry. William then pretends to be the Yellow Eyes, we know this thanks to the voice color changing to a different shade, in which he promises to put Dave back together. As he tears the stuffed animals from him, this shatters Dave's soul across the 5 stuffed animals. That's why, after Fredbear was taken, we hear a heartbeat monitor go blank. He's died. The next thing we're introduced to is a character named Nightmare, this shadow of Fredbear, who according to the files is Shadow Freddy, and the night ends showing us the box. Not another minigame, but a box. Why? Because, with Dave dead, his soul is now in the 5 plushies, locked inside of that box, left to be forgotten. So what's inside the box? The 5 plushies of Dave, with his soul inside, which leads us to the next game. When is FNAF World? Well, most theorists, including myself, would have told you it takes place during Five Nights at Freddy's 3. This is because the clock ending of FNAF World is connected to the Happiest Day minigames, which many of us believed occurred during Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I thought this was because it was a set of half of the souls of the MCI and Dave to rest. But let's be honest, that would make Dave kinda not special if every child was able to shatter themselves. Plus, we've yet to see proof from the other continuities, so we'll cut soul splitting out of the equation and look at the evidence now. During Five Nights at Freddy's 3, the player looks through meta methods to access the total of 6 minigames, often referred to as the Happiest Day minigames. In them, you collect cake and then give that cake to all 5 MCI kids, with Happiest Day being the last minigame, in which we play as the puppet coming to a party of the MCI kids where the Golden Freddy character gets its mask, and the MCI and the puppet all move on, giving us the good ending of Five Nights at Freddy's 3.
If you can answer this, which ending really happened?
I've given a lot of thought as to whether or not I should answer this question.
Okay.
And I went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the answer is very interesting.
Okay.
You know? The answer is very interesting. The answer is complex.
Okay.
However, I'm not going to answer it.
Was this meant to be the final game?
I think when I was making that game, in my mind, that was the end of a trilogy.
Yeah.
You know, I think in my mind, the story was going to be 3 games.
Do you get it yet? In a Reddit post by Scott, back in the day, during Sister Location, he would reveal that there has only been 1 retcon in the series. Mind you, this was way before FFPS, so this can't be referring to Charlie's gender, which was the popular belief. No, this was something from before Sister Location that was an established piece of information that Scott changed, and it was this. Scott intended Five Nights at Freddy's 3 to be the final game, so after Follow Me, the MCI were stuck in a world without a body, trapped in the memories of Freddy's, and thanks to us, we were able to set them free and give them their happiest day. But Follow Me is not when the spirits are set free anymore, as we know they were put inside the Funtime animatronics after the events. No, when the MCI move on is in FFPS, After the Fire, showing us the graves of the 6 kids inside Happiest Day, which means Happiest Day was during FFPS, not Five Nights at Freddy's 3. In fact, the MCI being inside the Funtime stops them from being inside Frights at all. Then again, this should have been obvious, thanks to everyone's favorite game, UCN. If you didn't know, in UCN, by activating Golden Freddy on one and then using a death coin on them, it will cause Fredbear to attack you, which I and many others always found weird. That is until the release of the week before, which describes how putting in the code 1983 into the phone causes the phone guy to hear the incident of the big bite, and ends up being bitten by some animatronic at the same time as Dave. Newsflash, the character who bit Dave was Fredbear, which means this Fredbear we're seeing in UCN, it's Dave. Dave is still alive in UCN. He's still here, which means Happiest Day hasn't happened yet. In UCN, we can also trigger 1 Old Man Consequences and get access to the Red Lake, where we're told to leave the demon to his demons, rest your own soul for now, and can hear the sounds of William being tortured, even when the Red Bear isn't in UCN anymore, suggesting the Red Bear isn't the one in control of UCN. But by jumping into the lake, we get a trophy in, wouldn't you know it, Five Nights at Freddy's World. In the original FNAF World, this was caused by the player reaching too deep into the game's code and by jumping inside the lake. So to answer your question, when is FNAF World? It's during UCN. We also know this from the Easter eggs like OMC existing, or the toys that show up on our desk, or Dee Dee, but I digress. This also means the Red Bear in UCN is the player of FNAF World. The characters who told us to move on, which results in the Happiest Day coming to life. This can't be Dave, as the player puts Dave's pieces in place for him to be set free. No, this is Cassidy. Cassidy, who's asked by the imaginary friends, the Yellow Eyes, to help put the pieces in place, or create the Happiest Day minigames for Dave to put back together. And by doing so, Cassidy moves on during UCN, finally given their Happiest Day. Pretty easy, huh? Yeah, now we gotta go back and answer some lingering questions, like what happened to the box, and in order to answer that, we have to ask, when is Midnight Motorist? Using context clues, at the end of the security puppet minigame, we see a set of tire marks, and then getting into Midnight Motorist, we're directly in a vehicle, driving home as William Afton the night of Halloween, October 1983. And a lot of people think Dave died this day because of Curse of Dreadbear, however we know this isn't the case, considering FNAF 4 shows the characters wearing shorts and tank tops, as the grass is green and healthy with flowers blooming, which, taking more than 2 seconds of looking at the ground during Curse of Dreadbear, the ground is dead and flat, including the trees, because it's fall. Pretty common sense stuff. And considering we know Dave dies in 1983, this means he's already dead by the time this minigame occurs. So no, we're not getting into the sprawling debate of how Dave might have died before Charlie. So, with Mike as the runaway, what's the story of Midnight Motorist? Well, we'd have to look at the other pieces, such as the footprints. Considering Charlie just died, it can't be hers, let alone the puppet's footprints not looking like that, which leaves only one person for this to be, FNAF. However, as we know, his pieces are inside the plushies in the box, so how could he be there? Unless it's not FNAF. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the night we were introduced to the box is when we fight against the creature known as Nightmare, or as the files refers to him, Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy was reaching out to Michael after the bite, luring him to the thing he was meant to forget about. He was being lured to the box. That's both what the mound is in Midnight Motorist, and the place Michael keeps running off to, and what leads William to have to deal with both of these issues. One, by shoving Michael into something he can't escape every night, leading to the creation of the first observation chambers, created to observe Michael as the shadow would continue to bother him during the night. And then, he had to put those damned plushies somewhere. He wouldn't come up with an answer for that until years later, and after some testing on his daughter. Whatever was creating this shadow, it must have been inside the plushies, and so William placed all 5 of his new subjects, the MCI, to find out if the two souls can possess the same body. And while he wouldn't find out immediately, his test was a success, as the children, most notably Cassidy, would notice they had memories in their head that wasn't theirs, and while the others were stuck in confusion, Cassidy reached out to the boy in her head, learning about him. He can't see, he can only hear sounds, and discovering the most important piece of information she needed, the existence of the plushies. The plushies were his friends, and to gain trust of the bite victim, Cassidy fit right into place. It's me, your friend. And she managed to gain the trust of the others the same exact way. And thanks to her putting that idea inside of Dave's head, she and the others became the plushies that Dave would move around and control, no different than when he was a kid. This is also why Cassidy can seemingly teleport, because that's what his imaginary friend was capable of doing. It's what Dave was used to. He also likely is the reason Cassidy was able to control the characters during custom nights to begin with. The real person who was tampering with the animatronics wasn't Cassidy, it was Bite Victim, at the control of Cassidy. Until Follow Me, when their bodies were destroyed. The other 5 would lead the spirits getting Will spring-locked, while Bite Victim was once again stuck in darkness, until the endos of the 5 animatronics, and I do mean 5, were shown in the movie that Cassidy does have a skeleton, and Candy Cadet stories say 5 things coming together, not 4. Her absence from Help Wanted was because Golden Freddy period doesn't show up, but I digress. They mixed together in the furnace and dispersed into the fun times, and once created into Ennard, all 6 of them, and Elizabeth, are made into one. Dave was finally into one, but he wasn't able to move on. His body was still bound by the MCI, and after kicking out his sister, he gained back control and returned to the restaurant where he was last alive, Fredbear's, which was now rebranded into a Freddy's.
One big happy family!
But despite his attempts, the doors would begin to shut, as a fire started to grow stronger around them, and they were taken to another world. Dave was taken to this sort of sanctuary to keep Dave safe, while the Yellow Eyes gave Cassidy one job: to put the pieces in place for him, help him rest. And while Cassidy helped in the tormenting of Afton along with Andrew, the same way that she had been controlling the others for years, she eventually realized after 4920 or whatever the heck it was, that she couldn't kill him, and so she went inside the sanctuary, finding all of the clocks and setting up the Happiest Day minigames, before jumping into the Red Lake and getting her happiest day. And at the place his party was at, Dave also was finally given his happiest day. Until I see you again, matane.